Welcome, I'm Rob Moyer, and this is What You Need to Know. And with me today are Anand Fedele. I'm not Adele, Anand.
I wish I was Adele. Life would be way more interesting. I were Adele, but yeah.
You have to work on your singing a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
And Sophie Sophie DiPietro.
Mm-hmm.
We're all from the Ocean River Institute, and we're going to talk today about the North Atlantic Righe whale and how we are rescuing the whales from entanglement. And as you know, the North Atlantic Righe whale is listed as recognized as an endangered species. And that means the government must do everything it can to improve conditions to increase and restore the population of right whales. And so today, the population in 2022 was reported by NOAA to be less than 350 whales. So this is a grave situation. It was at that level when I first saw a right whale in the 70s, and it got up over 400, and now it's shrunk again, and so we want to stop the decline by taking more actions. And the problems are that there are ship strikes, and then the other problem is when the whales become entangled in fishing gear. And generally that's only lobster trap lines and crab trap lines, where the whale will catch it on one flipper or the other, and then become, it may roll a bit or whatever, but it ends up getting the line tangled around its body, and it leaves scarring marks and can make it difficult for a whale to eat. But more significantly, it has to drag all this stuff around with it, which tires it out and just makes the situation really tough. So, what are we going to do about that? And what we're going to do about that, I guess, is that there's a Safe Seas Act. Sophie, can you tell us about the Safe Seas Act of 2022?
Yeah, so the Safe Seas Act of 2022 basically makes available federal funding for states to apply for grants, which they then distribute the money to their lobstermen and crab fishermen to fund the purchase and replacement of their fishing gear so that it would be safer for the right whales, so that they wouldn't get entangled in the gear, and so that they can be compliant with the new federal regulations replacing fishing gear so that it's safer for the whales.
Yeah, that's really important. Mm-hmm. They're taking legislative action to protect the whales. And so what are we doing here at the Ocean River Institute about that?
Yeah, so basically what we're trying to do is we're trying to create broader awareness and support for this bill. And the way that we're doing that is we are collecting comments and signatures from thousands of people throughout the country. We actually have around 6,000 comments and signatures so far. And basically what we're trying to do is gain input from citizens about why they love right whales and want to see them protected, and why they also support this particular piece of legislation. And a lot of the work that we've been doing recently has been collecting all of this kind of input from the national constituency, and trying to basically put together the voices of Americans who want to see whales be protected. And this is exactly the kind of legislation that you want to support if you're in favor of that sort of thing.
So most places you get a petition and say sign it, and it's off to Washington.
Yeah.
But you seem to have been a little busier than that.
Yeah. Well, what we're trying to basically promote from people is to get them to actually talk about why they like, Atlantic right whales. And so a lot of the work that we've been doing has been going through these, hundreds and hundreds of comments from people from throughout the country, and basically distilling them into a format that can be easily read and engaged with by our lawmakers. So it's a lot of work. A lot of what us interns have been doing are going through comment by comment, making sure there aren't any typos, Making sure that, we have the people's names and the towns that they're from right next to the comments, so legislators know, oh, this person's from Illinois, this person's from Alaska, this person's from, California, to make sure that we emphasize that there's a network and a web of support for this bill. And that requires a lot of work on our part, but, it's a matter, again, of just distilling those comments and making sure they're in a format that can be easily parsed by lawmakers. So that's what we've been doing the past few weeks, has been working on this long, extensive document of all of these comments.
It sounds like it shouldn't be that much work, but they got 6,000 plus comments, and we have 4 interns, so we could divide the list into groups of 1,500, and then but the list is according to how they came in. Exactly. So the first one is for me because I'm testing the system out, and so you erase that one, and then you were just given these batches of numbers.
Yeah.
And the first challenge was to get all the states to be 2 letters.
Right.
So then we could sort it by state.
Exactly.
And so then we put it all together again and sorted it by state. And then I was able to give you different states. And so Anand being an A, I gave you A through, I forget.
C or something.
Yeah, Connecticut or something like that.
Yeah.
Right. So once by the time you got through California, that was 1/4 of the way through the list. We have a lot of people from California who are active in that.
Yeah.
And then, Sophie, what did you pick up on?
I think I got Maryland through New York. So there were a lot of, I think that covered Massachusetts, Maine, and what else? We had Massachusetts, Maine, New York was another big one. There were a lot of signers from New York.
And we had New Jersey, because that's...
New Jersey as well.
That's
That was pretty big, yeah. But, so lots of comments from people from Maine, from Massachusetts. New York was interesting because a lot of the signers in New York were from the city. So, New York City, Brooklyn, and it was interesting to see how many people were concerned about the North Atlantic Righe Whale.
Yeah.
Yes. That is just compelling, that we are... a national concern. We're so cosmopolitan that people are moving around, so that people in the inland states, as you'll find out later in the show, really care just as much as those of us sitting right by the Cape Cod Canal or right by the whale waters or something. Yeah. Right. So what was my next point to go to? There's a lot of work, and we talked about the details. Oh, and so what do we do with all these? So what the next step is, once we're ready to go, and we're not quite there yet, I will, Senator Jean Shaheen put forward this bill. She's our New Hampshire senator. And so I will call her office and say, I'd like to speak with the person on environment in Senator Shaheen's office. And that'll put me in touch with the legislative aide that is coordinating all the senators' environmental issues. So years ago, I was working on other ocean bills with Senator Warren, and the environment person in Senator Warren's office was Michelle Wu and some other people. So that was fun getting to know the former mayor when she was working as a legislative aide for Senator Warren. But so I'll find out who the person is in Jean Shaheen's office, and make contact by the phone, and then get her email address, and so I can then send her the formatted letter. So there'll be a cover page with the Ocean River Institute logo on it, and then a lot of pages. We figured out we could put it in 2 columns, and then if it's narrow, you can go down to 9-point print size, and not have it fall apart. So we try to make it easy. But what's fun is I'll be walking. I used to in the old days. Pre-Trump, actually. I would take them to Washington, and I would visit with all the members of the House Committee on Natural Resources. And on the cover page, it would say, your people are on page 37 to 46 or something. And then, I had the whole thing together so they could come out. Sometimes the staffer, it would just disappear in the back room, in the document, and the staffer would come out and say, wow, I knew this person, but I didn't know about this person. And the other thing is that you then have the staff people realizing that there's a lot of people who care about right whales, and they're taking the time to express themselves. And if one person takes the time to write more than just sign their name, they know that that person represents a family, friends. It's like a tip of an iceberg, and it's like when you're at the committee level working on this, you don't have the partisan pressures about it yet. You're just serving your constituents, and so that's when, because of people who are writing about this right whale issue, their legislators can tell the lobbyists, not this time. I'm helping my constituent with an issue of importance to them, and that's something they can talk about. So it's always an exciting thing. I always get my meetings in Washington because they like to hear, they like to know what the constituents are doing, and they like the way that I'm putting their best foot forward in the bills. So are we ready for the comments?
I think so.
Yes.
Let's see, I got some printed out here. We're gonna go round robin. And I guess we were starting with Anand?
Yeah, so we're just gonna share some comments that we thought were interesting, and so this first one is, if we are going to survive, we simply must learn to live in and be a part of all nature, rather than the current attitude of being stewards, i.e. above nature. That's it. As stewards, we have failed royally. No more shortcuts. And that's from Iris Wolf from Prescott, Arizona. So,
Arizona.
Yeah.
Sophie.
In consideration of the fact that lobster fishermen have been responsible and practice sustainability in their lobstering efforts, the government should step up and assist them in keeping right whales safe. In this way, representatives like yourselves are not only opting to do the right thing, but also rewarding good stewardship. And that one's from Janice Bailey in New York, New York.
And from Bellingham, Washington, Lori Goodmanson writes, having lived and worked aboard a traveling sailboat along the East Coast for 13 years, I know how precarious the natural marine balance is in our oceans. Having always been a good steward of the environment, these fishers should not have to cover the costs themselves. Help sustain working waterfronts, successful small boat lobstering, and the right whale population. By Lori Gundermanson in Bellingham, Washington.
So this next one, the right whales were given that name by whalers because they live and cruise close to shore, easy for the whalers to kill. So they are extremely vulnerable and should be protected by the Safe Seas Act. And that's from Jonathan Peter from Sun Lakes, Arizona.
This one says, don't any of you remember being fascinated by animals like them and others that are endangered when you were kids? Don't you want your children and grandchildren to have that opportunity to see the majesty of them as well? And that one's from Donna Nealand in Big Lake, Minnesota.
Lobstermen and consumers should not have to cover the cost of new trap lines to rescue right whales from potential entanglements. Right whales are a national treasure, pride of New Englanders, and sometimes companions of boaters and beachgoers. Christopher Lawrence wrote that from Spokane, Washington.
Right whales are nearing extinction, and I fear we will fail to recognize that species loss contributes to the failure of ecosystems to support all life within that system when one species dies. We are quickly destroying our oceans and therefore ourselves. Please take note and do all you can to help this magnificent species survive. Thank you. And that's from Canon Tazeel from Beverly Hills, California.
This one's a little longer. It says, protect our waters. Whales are essential to the ecosystem and health of our oceans. And the health of our oceans is essential to the health of the planet and all living beings, including humans. Just do the right thing. You are honored to hold this office, and your job is to represent the people you serve. Humans cannot survive on Earth alone. Wake up and speak up for future generations, if they are lucky enough to survive. The leading cause of death for the critically endangered right whale are fishing entanglements. Fishing entanglements from lobster and snow crab gear are a massive threat to the species' future survival. And that one's from Pamela Boscow in South Portland, Maine.
Thank you, Pamela. My daughter lives on the beach and sent me a video of a mother and her calf with the cutest little water spout. Absolutely incredible. We must start protecting actions as soon as possible. Save the baby whales and protect the breeding population now and not put off for later consideration. Better late than never, writes Alice Trevette from Sarasota, Florida.
Okay, got another long one here. I've been following the transformation of lobstermen/women into stewards of their environment for a long time. I wholeheartedly support alleviating some of the financial burden they carry in replacing all their gear to protect whales. They deserve our financial collaboration in this critically important effort. We need to support fishermen who make their livelihoods the right way by conserving the marine resources they count on for their livelihood, which creates sustainable conditions for both the fishermen and all the creatures that live in the sea. We are very late to the party of living in sustainable and prosperous harmony with ocean ecosystems we're a part of, but it's never too late. The Safe Seas Act is a very sensible proposal and a win-win in my book. And that comes from Cuerdo Galdo from Galala, California.
This next one says, we are products of our environment. Everything humanity has become or achieved has been at the expense of our planet. Do not repay that gift with destruction and neglect, or our children and posterity will surely condemn us. And that one's from Scott Solia in Sewell, New Jersey.
Although we live in landlocked Iowa, we have relatives in Maine and care about the protection of all species. The interlocking connections of any ecosystem need to be understood and appreciated. People's desires must recognize the dangers of overuse and indiscriminate destruction. Barbara and Jim Dale, Decorah, Iowa.
So this next one is the strength of our ecosystem depends on the resilience of its diversity. The right whale, as well as other species, must be protected in service of our planet's ecosystem and survival, writes Darcy Sicarda from Kellysville, California.
Right whale population numbers are dropping, not increasing. They need us to act fast before they go extinct. Please help them to have at least a fighting chance at survival. What a sad world we live in, where profit is everything, and wildlife keeps getting pushed out so humans can expand. And this one's from Jim Rodriguez in Pittston, Maine.
Whales are mammals, and they feel everything we mammals feel. They fear, panic, and grief. They feel fear, panic, and grief, just as we do. How would you feel in their position? Writes Joseph Getty from Collinsville, Illinois.
Since the profit margin is so slim, the Safe Seas Act is a realistic way to engage the fishermen. And that comes from Melissa Splenger from Pueblo, Colorado.
Colorado.
Yeah.
Every living thing has its place in our precious ecosystem. We need a healthy ocean. If we ask these fishermen to protect us, we should help defer the cost of transitioning to gear that won't kill the animals in our seas. And that one's from Richard Smith in Melvindale, Michigan, I believe is MI.
Yeah, Michigan.
Michigan.
The first rule of conservation, Aldo Leopold said, was not to throw away any of the pieces. This is legislation that will follow that fundamental rule, writes Elizabeth Taylor from Lake Forest, Illinois.
I am deeply concerned that right whales are given protections. Species diversity is critical, and we are experiencing countless extinctions and catastrophic climate change, the consequences of which are not always readily predictable. It is imperative with the environment, ecologies, and species conservation that legislators and agencies are ahead of the curve, anticipating and taking measures before it's too late. And that comes from Dennis Halb from Sonoma, California.
Most marine animals die from byproducts of discarded human fishing gear, climate change, plastics, pollution, farm and storm runoff, and oil spills. Because they are all man-made items, it takes humans to correct all the wrongs we did in this world. The worst animals that will suffer the most are usually the biggest of the ocean. And that one is from Gregory Alexander in St. Clair Shores, Michigan again.
Extinction is forever. I just returned from a trip to Oregon and was once again struck by how much people treasure their natural wildlife and forests. Please follow their excellent example and give this bill priority. Species preservation and financial aid those who protect right whales have a shelf life. Once gone, these whales are gone forever, like the passenger pigeons who once darkened the skies of America. Let's not make the same tragic mistake over and over again. Adrian Nauman, Esquire.
Whales are like the canaries in the coal mines. They foretell of drastic environmental consequences. They are endangered because of what we are allowing in our oceans, shipping and fishing practices. Please save these beautiful mammals, says B. Knuckles from Woodland, California.
The oceans and the animals that inhabit them comprise our largest ecosystem. We must have healthy, functioning ecosystems for life on this earth to continue as we know it. Our lives are dependent on functioning ecosystems. Loss of species degrades ecosystems. We have already degraded or destroyed too many of our ecosystems. This must stop. And that's from Joanne Heberger in St. Paul, Minnesota.
I grew up on the shores of New England, digging and eating clams and quahogs, fishing, looking for whales, and eating lobsters. Let's keep it that way for others, writes Joyce Harrington from South Bend, Indiana.
I live in Maine and recognize the importance of the lobster industry to our state's economy, not to mention the generations of lobster families. This is their life. Instead of them generating money to fight the restrictions, let's use money to make the changes to lobster gear safer for right whales. My family does not eat meat, yet compromise is important, and so are the right whales. Thank you, says Eric Frymouth Jr. from Wayne, Pennsylvania.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Having seen right whales close up, I believe they are amazing animals. We need to work together so that they survive, says Noreen Hyrie in Bowie, Maryland.
Having grown up near the New England coast, I have had the privilege of seeing right whales and have also known many lobstermen. Both need protection. Please support helping lobstermen transition to gear that will protect this incredible species. Kathy Coe, Chilmark, Massachusetts. Chilmark is one of the towns on Martha's Vineyard.
Cool. I live on the coast, and this is the right thing to do for our whales. We must change the way we quote-unquote fish to a do-no-harm mode instead of a who-cares mode, and this act could help. Please pass this legislation and any and all laws with a chance of helping our ocean creatures, says Joe Turpin from Vancouver, Washington.
This is my last one. It says, because we cherish the whales, but we also want to keep eating lobster, the burden shouldn't only fall on the lobstermen, says Detlef Jors from Belfast, Maine.
It's always been important to minimize bycatch in fisheries because we should never kill wildlife needlessly. However, due to past use of harvesting gear that catches non-target species indiscriminately and often causes unintentional slaughter, many species are now impacted to the point of endangerment. It's now become more important than ever to use gear that is effective in catching target species, and not anything that might blunder into the trap, writes Robert Ferreira from Cheyenne, Wyoming.
We can not let our largest animals on the planet become extinct or even close to being endangered. If the largest animals on the planet are gone, then what damage to the oceans will occur is impossible to think of, says Christina Fukuda from Los Angeles, California.
I think I shorted you quotes, because that's all you got. So on
Maybe.
the backside?
I think the backside are yours.
Oh, I wonder how that happened.
I have one
I
more
don't
if you
know.
want.
I have, yeah. I have two. I have quite a few more. I do not live in Maine, but am deeply concerned about the health of the oceans and its wonderful wildlife, and the fishermen who rely on the natural wealth of the seas to make their living. From what I understand, the Safe Seas Act of 2022 will provide needed serious help to these men and women. Please support this act. Adam Wilkins, Madison, Wisconsin.
All right, this is my last one. It says, right whales are part of the food chain. They eat krill like other baleen whales and are prey for orcas. We've got to protect them. Otherwise, the ocean ecosystem will fall out of balance. Please clean up the ocean and do not allow these whales to go extinct, says Judith Lomax from Laguna Beach, California.
I'm very concerned about the fate of the right whales. These magnificent, intelligent, and sensitive animals are irreplaceable and essential to the life of the oceans. Herman Melville, one of our greatest American authors, included this animal in the scope of his profound admiration for the whales. It would be tragic and an unforgivable failure to let these whales be driven. I got to do this from the beginning. It would be tragic and an unforgivable failure to let these whales be driven to extinction simply because we failed to act to help prevent their entrapment in fishing lines. Help those who fish and trap for a living afford better ways to do so that do not endanger these whales. Thank you. Mara Bradley from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And finally, our wildlife means a lot to me. I want there to be wildlife to look at and see the beauty that Earth has to give to future generations, but that cannot be done without your help. And that's from Miss J. Cohen of Beechwood, Ohio. So she doesn't mince her words.
No, sir.
If you're inspired to add your words to this, please, our website is www.oceanriver.org. Ocean River, one word, .org. And when you get on the homepage, you'll see 6 different campaigns there. And one of them's got a right whale on it, so I guess that's one you should go
Yeah.
to. Yeah, that'd be a good idea. And there you can read a little more about the situation and the bill, but then you can click the sign, pledge, comment button there.
Yeah.
And please send us some more words because you will be heard. People do read these. Yes, the senator's too busy to read them all, but her staff will read them all. And there's a number of senators who are very active on this.
Yeah.
And you can also tell just by the language from a lot of these comments that people are really passionate about this issue. And a lot of the time it's hard to kind of communicate that, passion that you feel to legislators, but this is a great way to do it, And, we're doing the work of, again, like distilling the comments and actually getting it to lawmakers. But, if you're as passionate about this issue as a lot of the folks that, we've read off their comments are, then implore you to go to the website, leave a comment, and it'll make it onto this document that we're sending to Congress. So, yeah.
Remember that comment that you pulled out about why it's a right whale?
Yeah, so actually I wanted to talk about that a little bit. There's some actually interesting history behind that I didn't know. So I'll read the comment again, and but yeah, basically right whales were given their name by whalers because they live and cruise close to the shore, easy for the whalers to kill. They're extremely vulnerable and should be protected by the Safe Seas Act. So I didn't actually know that, but that's where they get the name right whale from, is because they were the quote unquote right whale to kill or to harvest, for whalers. And historically, I wouldn't be surprised if that was part of the reason why their numbers have dwindled and in the past and current. But there's some interesting history behind that. I had no idea that that's where they got their name from. But
yeah, and like the gray whale on the Pacific, and even more so, they like sandy, shoaly, shallow waters. And so I've been able to walk beside right whales at Provincetown, where they come pretty close to the shore there. And darn, that's the one time the camera doesn't work, Got regal big guys going by and stuff. But they have so much blubber around them that they float when they're dead. Yeah. And so a number of years ago, like 6 years ago, they were seeing less right whales in the Gulf of Maine. And they goes, what's with that? And they went up and looked in the Gulf of St. Lawrence, and there were right whales up there. So to me, that's a good news story, because when a population gets to a certain size with its resource base, the adolescent ones will go wandering beyond. And so they've discovered, which they've been there before, the Gulf of St. Lawrence. And it's pretty cool up there. And so there are all these whales up there. And then they started getting entangled with the crab. There's a lot of snow crab fishing there in the Brunswick side of the Gulf of St. Lawrence. And they got entangled in the gear, and 3 of them were entangled. And so they called in the rescue people with a long pole to get them out. And they came up from the Bay of Fundy, Canadians from the Bay of Fundy. And they brought their Zodiacs and boats up there. Wow. And they were cutting the tail off the tail. They were cutting the rope on the tail of the right whale when it got freed, and then the whale just lifted its tail up and dropped it right on the person, killing him on the spot. And this was the ace whale, freer of Canada, basically, of eastern Canada for sure. And so that meant that two other whales that were entangled were just left to their own devices. And then we started seeing all these right whales dying from ship strikes.
Yeah.
And we lost about a dozen. Normally we lose about 3 right whales a year, but that summer was really bad. And some of the whales they would find, they'd find them off of halfway across the Gulf of St. Lawrence. Miquelon is an island about halfway out there.
Yeah.
And they, so they would identify the whale and they would study it, and then they found the same whale on the shores of Newfoundland 3 months later. So they could figure the trajectory, and yes, it had died off of New Brunswick, and then it had gone, so that's the longevity. And so they started going around with airplanes trying to find these whales, and they found 4 of them all along that. Very few people live on that St. Lawrence side of Newfoundland. It's very high escarpments, and it's not too easy living on the shore. It's easy behind the escarpments, but that's where all the good hunting is and stuff. So, there were 4 of them that had been, and it looked like a dry suit, and that the person had emptied the suit. So apparently the blubber held together like a neoprene, and all the bones had just sunk out of the whale and stuff. So right whales are just amazing the way they do that. And the other whales have a dorsal fin on the back, but the right whale doesn't. It's just smooth on the back. And so my first experience was, I was, what would you call it? I guess I was a rising junior at college. And I was with 3 other people off the coast of Maine in a 27-foot sailboat. And suddenly there was this stretch of hide or sandbar the size of the boat beside the boat. And I was pointing at it, and my friends below thought I was having an epileptic attack because I was going, "Abi, aba, abu," And they got up there just in time to see this kind of slick spot in the water where the whale had been. And he didn't come up anywhere else. And so, and later, it didn't come up anywhere else. And I think that was because he was looking at the boat. He was checking it out and just disappeared. Because they usually tend to, they're feeding on the surface, they're eating copepods, they're straining through their mouth and stuff. But it looked like a sandbar because there was no dorsal fin. Whereas when you see a humpback, as they're seeing off of Plymouth right now, there's a wheeling motion to them with the dorsal fin. And the reason that the fin is there is like the feather on an arrow, where it doesn't take much to help the arrow go straight through the air. It's just that little bit of feathering on the back of it. So these fast-swimming whales, like the humpback and the fin whale and the blue whale and the minke whale, are all chasing bait fish. And so they are trying to get to come into a ball, and there's a big ball of menhaden bait fish off of Plymouth last week or 2 weeks ago. And so they've been having a humpback, these 3 adolescent humpback whales have been hanging out in Plymouth.
Yes.
But the right whale is just so slow that it never developed the dorsal fin on it. Have you been hearing about the Plymouth whales?
Yes, I have been hearing about the Plymouth whales because my dad likes to talk about the Plymouth whales and how they're being harassed by the boaters. He's very concerned for the whales being he uses maybe more colorful language, but he's concerned about the whales. He wants them to be left alone. I think people are trying to get their look, which is fair. They're beautiful creatures, but they're the kind of creature that you need to keep your distance from, because like you were saying, they're not violent creatures, but they're huge.
Yeah.
So if they hit your boat or bring their tail down on your boat, it can be like catastrophic.
Yeah.
And I don't think people quite realize it. So the Coast Guard's issuing all these warnings. Harbor masters are issuing warnings just to let people know to observe from a distance. But it's
that's one of the advantages of the whale watches, is that you've got all these people watching the whales.
Yeah.
And so there was a case about 15 years ago where this pleasure boat went charging up to the whale, right in front of all the whale. There were 2 whale watch vessels,
Yeah.
and so they filed charges and they got convicted for harassing the whales. So they can do that. I had the good fortune of bringing my sailboat up from Sandwich in the canal a few weeks ago, and we anchored outside the canal, so it was early in the morning off of Plymouth, and there was this broiling water. It was all bubbling around and stuff, and those are the menhaden or pogies that are swimming around circles and stirring the water up and stuff. And that's the classic kind of situation where you want to see a right whale.
Right.
You know, I forget what it's called, but it'll come down from below and open its mouth and try to get the whole thing in its jaws, you know, and then the water strains out through the baleen and stuff. But then further on, there was a young adolescent humpback just lazing around, and even further was another whale. And I was sailing with the same guy who was with me when I had the whale attack back. My college friend rejoined me for this cruise umpteen years later. And so this whale kind of pointed at us, and I could see that the front jawbone kind of coming at us. I said, that's a right whale, because that's what they do. Is they get these big lips that come on the side and stuff. It was just really going slow, and the right whale has when it blows, the spout goes in 2 different directions, whereas the other ones are like a exclamation point. But this one is, so we were sure we were seeing that. And then, because we were just in a sailboat, so we were going like 3 to 4 knots or so. I guess I'd slowed down because there was a whale there. So so we were just enjoying the whale, and this motorboat came zipping in from far away, and was aiming right for the head of the whale, I think. And so the whale rolled on his side and waved this enormous flipper in the air, and this is why we call them, the humpback whales are called Megaptera nova angulis, meaning large-winged New Englanders. So he was waving his humpback flipper, and then he had a mustache-shaped tail with the white underneath it that I could see go sideways. He was not a happy whale, and apparently he'd been sleeping, and we were not disturbing his rest until this buzz boat came by.
Yeah.
And, so I'm right there with your dad's concern. Because that was just harassment. I mean, he had the whole open ocean. If he was heading for Scituate, he could have gone a little more to the right, but no, he knew we were watching a whale, and that is just stupid.
Yeah, and this somewhat relates to that, but a few of the comments that I read, and I didn't include them in what I read today, but a few of them were talking about how the actual noise pollution caused by a lot of these motorboats is really kind of destructive to the natural state of these whales. It can kind of interrupt their communication patterns, it sounds like, because it just kind of completely disrupts their way of life, and it's not it's multiple ways that humans are kind of interfering with whales in their natural state. And I think we just, generally speaking, need to be more conscious of when we're on the open ocean, or when we're out there on the water, just being conscious that these giants exist, and being understanding of their situation, because like so many people pointed out, they are in a pretty drastic situation, and they're mammals, they're sensitive creatures a lot of the times, they're gentle giants, and I don't know, just being understanding of the whales.
A lot that comes across. So with the COVID, a lot of boat traffic just went to zero. And suddenly we had a quiet ocean. And some of the whales changed their tune. They I think they raised the frequency, so they weren't quite as low. So apparently they can modulate according to get around the background noise, or that they'd rather sing at this level, but it was noisy. They found it worked better that way. So it was a remarkable opportunity to see what we're kind of striving for in the environment, a more natural place. And then we had a little hiatus there where there were less traffic on the streets. We found that animals came wandering into town when they could walk the streets without being squashed all the time. It was just, it was really interesting. But noise is a problem, although the whales, the noise has only been getting, I don't know, I was just really pleased to see the right whale population go from 350 to 425, and there was no less noise,
Yeah.
but there were significant actions taken. One of them was that by going on all the whale watches, we got a map of where the humpbacks in particular were frequently feeding on Stellwagen Bank.
Mm.
So Stellwagen Bank, for those of you who don't know, is like a threshold between the Gulf of Maine and Boston Harbor and Mass Bay. So right between Gloucester and Provincetown is the threshold of Mass Bay, and that's where this bank steps up. And because of the rotating of the world, we've got water circulating counterclockwise in the northern hemisphere here. And so we've got water in the Gulf of Maine coming around, picking up all the nutrients from the streams, the Kennebec, the St. John, the Merrimack, Penobscot. And that all gets upwelded on Stellwagen Bank. And so it becomes Chuckwagon Bank, where they all go to feed. And so with 30 years of looking at whales there, it appeared that they were eating in like a figure eight formation with a bulb to the south and a bulb to the north and kind of a skinny part in between. And the Coast Guard traffic lane from like New York, when you get clear of Race Point and Provincetown, is to cut diagonally across Stellwagen Bank. And so you're hitting both dumbbells of the 8-figure there. So the Coast Guard changed the course route of all the ships and said you have to go east-west and just go across that narrow part. And then they teamed up with Cornell and set up these buoys that along the channel there that are listening for the whales and sending radioing in to Cornell Bird Ornithological Lab the sounds of the sea. And so they can detect when there's a right whale near there. And so I call it the Marauders map, because you can turn it on and you can see which ones are flashing when there's a right whale near there. And then the ships have to slow down to 10 knots.
Oh, good, yeah.
And so now, because of the situation with the right whales, the Coast Guard just issued the process of the Coast Guard, of having ships always go 10 knots, or more places they have to go 10 knots. Especially during the seasons when the right whales are there. Because the right whales are here in the summertime, which is where the food is, and then they go in the wintertime off of St. Augustine and Jacksonville, Florida, and that's where they give birth. It's clear water there. And then usually the moms and the calves are the first ones to appear off of Plymouth and stuff, because they're hungry. They're going to pull it back up here and stuff. So that's important.
It's good to see that there's kind of different actions being taken at different levels to address this problem. Obviously, we have the bill that we're focusing on that we talked about, but it's interesting to learn how there are different parts of the government that are taking different steps. That the Coast Guard is doing that sort of work,
and that navigation,
and that they're partnering too with academic institutions to actually monitor and track these animals. So it's important that you have all these kind of pieces coming together to support species conservation efforts. It's all all part of a big.
Well, it's a systems approach that we're talking about. With all everything else we do, it's like everything's connected. So if you can adjust that over there, that can help a right whale over here.
Absolutely.
It's not the first time that there's been major shifts in the way that specifically fishermen and people that work in the maritime industry have had to change their behaviors for whale preservation. It was a really big shift in, I think, either the late 1800s, early 1900s, around that time when whaling became, I actually think it was earlier than that, when whaling became illegal because they were driving whales to extinction, and so no one was allowed to whale anymore and people needed to find a new livelihood. There's a really cool museum in New Bedford called the New Bedford Whaling Museum, and I used to go there all the time when I was a kid.
That is so cool.
It's a really cool museum. It talks about the history and conservation of whaling. A lot of the stuff's still applicable today because we still see a decline in whale populations for different reasons. But they also have a really cool boat. They have one of the whaling ships in this big warehouse, and you can go on it and see how these people were like whaling. It's insane because the boats aren't that big, and they were taking whole whales onto the boats. But so it just goes to show that there can be real systematic change to protect whales. People are willing to do it.
Yeah, the boats are like 100 feet long, and then there's a 60-foot whale.
Yeah.
And they're kind of put a big hook in the side of the blubber and somehow try to roll the whale and cut it off. And
then, they have the little like rowboats almost that they would take out to try and get the whale. It was
like fishing dories, but yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So that's why I keep my distance from whales because since I was a kid, I was seeing how big they were, and I'm like,
they're just so
from a distance.
So huge.
Yeah, they're huge.
Yeah. And what's exciting about a whale watch is that it's so open there that, you can be a distance, but you feel you're up close because the animal's so big. And it's just
scales.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's no fear that the whale might take you down.
No, because the whales know what's going on.
Yeah.
But there was a problem in Plymouth where the boats were all jamming in around those 3 adolescent whales. And one of them, I think he was feeding on the menhaden or something.
Yeah.
And he slammed his chin onto the bow of the boat.
Right. Oh, I saw that video,
Yeah, I mean, you brought it to me, actually.
Yeah,
that's right.
It's a crazy video.
And fortunately, everybody was in the stern of the boat. And so nobody was between the boat and the whale, because that would have been the end of that person.
Yeah, it's not great.
In no time. And fortunately, the boat gave down enough so there wasn't significant damage to the boat.
Yeah.
Which I hope means there wasn't significant damage to the whale.
Yeah.
Because there was enough give in the whole situation. But you got to watch out for those rowdy adolescent whales. They're unpredictable.
Yeah. Well, I'd be pretty annoyed if someone was, harassing me while I was trying to eat.
I don't know. I think they were totally focused on the fish.
They didn't even notice.
Care about. Yeah, they're just gonna smash around and don't keep me from my. My Doritos or whatever.
Yeah, fair enough.
Adolescence and food.
Yeah. No, can't interrupt.
Yeah, so it's really important that the senators know that you care about something like this, because there's so many, they don't know where to put their efforts and stuff. So they really love to hear from constituents, which means, please, www.oceanriver.org. And click on the right whales and tell us what your encounters with a right whale have been. So you actually saw a right whale.
Yeah, I did see a right whale when I was just a little young girl. I think I was 9, so it was quite some time ago. But I was at Girl Scout camp, which was, so very connected to wilderness at Girl Scout camp. But so we went on a whale watch. It was like a big trip because we got to go off the camp and we took vans and we pulled up to the whale watch. There were like 20 of us.
You know what town you were in?
Oh,
was it on Cape Cod
it was on
Plymouth?
Cape Cod.
Yeah.
Because the camp was in Brewster.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know where the
We
closest.
probably went to Provincetown.
Yeah, that makes sense.
There is one out of Barnstable, but it's small. And
so it was a pretty big whale watch, a pretty big boat.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we saw a lot of humpback whales, and then over the speaker, someone was like, "There's a right whale over there," and it was super special because, we didn't really know what right whales were, but they were like saying that it was like rare to see one, so I took a picture of it with my disposable camera. It was one of those that you have to twist it and then take the picture. I don't know if it came out great, but it was
you
just.
saw the back of the whale, or
I think it came up and we saw its tail.
We did see the tail because they don't often do it, but when they do, it's very triangular and black, whereas the humpback is very kind of mustache shaped tail.
Yeah. So it was really cool. To see that's actually the last time I've been on a whale watch, but it was a pretty cool.
They're still
watch.
out there. That's the important thing. Is now lots of people do it.
Yeah. Even more Girl Scouts are looking at the whales.
So I was fortunate 1 year, or actually 2 years. So I got a sailboat, and my son Ryan was doing sailing, so I had a buddy to go sailing with. So I got this bigger boat, and we'd have them put it in the water at April 15th. So it was the first boat put in the water down in Mattapoisett. And then we'd bring it up through the canal. And 1 year, there were right whales all around the mouth of the canal there.
Wow.
And the year before, they had published where the right whales frequent. And it was all by Provincetown and not by the canal or the Plymouth side. It's like the whales didn't get the memo because they decided to be somewhere else, which because the copepods were somewhere else probably. So we were sailing toward Wellfleet going east, and there was this right whale just going the same direction, kind of pacing us, and a little bit ahead, and then it turned as if to intersect, and so I headed off because I didn't want to have a whale collision.
Yeah.
And it came beside the boat, and then it veered obliquely to the north. So I think it was taking a look at me.
Yeah.
And then a couple of years later, we were bringing the boat from Provincetown to Boston, and out of nowhere, this mother and calf right whale just appeared and came beside the boat and then disappeared again. So it's like, it doesn't get better than that, being
No.
with a mother and calf right whale on a wooden sailboat with your son.
That's pretty great.
I mean,
Yeah.
I can. That's it. I'm all set. But
Yeah.
so I am confident that we will always have right whales because they are such tenacious and regal and smart
Yeah.
that I think they will survive.
Yeah.
Yeah. I hope so. And hopefully the fishermen in Maine and all these other coastal states can get their federal funding to
Yeah.
replace their fishing gear.
Yeah, it makes so much sense.
Yeah.
That the government should pay for this gear. I mean, they have to replace their gear every 3 years anyway.
Yeah.
But they're reluctant to change, and this is a national treasure. So it's important that we pay them for protecting our national treasure
Yeah.
by providing the gear they need.
Yeah.
It's not in the federal budget. It's nothing. Whereas for the fishermen, it's a big.
Yeah, it's a
thing.
huge expense.
No, I think there's so many issues where there's a tension between, environmental protection and some sort of industry. Fishing is a great example, but especially this instance too,
Yeah.
where you have, the lobstermen and crabmen who are, they depend on this work for their livelihood, and like some of the comments say, they don't make a ton of money. The profit margin on their hauls is pretty slim, so they don't have the resources to foot the bill, nor should they feel obligated to. Obviously they're reasonable people and want to do whatever they can to protect whales. They are some of the most conscious stewards of those animals, but at the same time they don't deserve to be footed with that bill. And that's part of the reason this is such a fantastic piece of legislation, is because it's catering to not only the environmental component of sustainability, but also the economic component of sustainability. It's allowing these people to maintain their livelihoods and continue doing what they're doing while protecting the whales, which is the most important thing. So
That's right.
win-win.
In 1870 something or other, Sylvester Morse invented the lobster trap.
Right.
And so it worked really well,
Yeah.
when you got this line and a buoy at the top, and you pull it up and the lobster's in there.
Great.
And now we have the technology so that the lobsterman can carry a cell phone and go out to and look at, and the cell phone will tell him exactly where, or his navigation thing will tell him exactly where the traps are, and then he just hits a button, and that signal, and that releases the buoys to come up, so that none of us boaters have to worry about getting entangled with lobster traps again, and he doesn't have to worry about them breaking away and stuff.
Yeah.
And they do them in a chain, so they don't have to just do buoy for each trap. But it also goes with the technology. We now have these Dacron and nylon lines that'll last longer than the old cotton ones and stuff.
Yeah.
So it's a coming together at just the time when we need solutions for encounters with wildlife.
Yeah.
We've got it.
Yeah.
Well, that's very interesting because when we go out boating in Buzzards Bay, I have to sit at the front of the boat if it's choppy at all, if there's any waves, and keep an eye out, scan the horizon for the lobster traps, because when you run them over, if they get tangled up in your motor, it's really bad news. So
Wouldn't that be great?
Yeah, that'd be great. Not having to worry about that anymore. I'm sure a lot of people would be happy about that, actually.
Yeah.
I didn't know they had. That was very interesting.
Yeah, so they're suspicious about this new technology.
Oh yeah.
But at first it was to have a breakaway, but then, they worry about if that's
You
going to
could
break way too
lose it,
early,
yeah.
they lose their traps and stuff. But this way, you don't have to worry about that.
Yeah. It's cool.
So that's our program on right whales
Yeah.
and entanglements. And so once again, www.oceanriver.org, and click on the right whale, and you'll see 6 other campaigns there. And so tomorrow we're back on to the lawn campaign.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I guess
When,
Not tomorrow,
Wednesday.
but yeah,
Wednesday. We almost went to Gloucester, but it
Yes.
just wouldn't work
didn't
out.
end up happening.
So Tuesday we were in Brookline last week, I think.
We were, yes.
Yeah, I wasn't there.
Yes.
No.
Tuesday we
You-
were in
you were
Brookline
there,
at the
yeah.
dog park.
Yeah. So that was fun.
Yes, it was very fun.
And Anand came up with the idea we should have dog treats.
Yes.
And
I
so-
wasn't actually there to see the implementation. So
No,
Big
I can't-
success.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
good. Phew.
Yeah.
Success.
We happened to be at the dog park, basically.
Yeah.
That
Our
was
biggest
convenient.
fans were the dogs. They would have signed if they could.
Yeah,
but
And that one dog
yeah, we made some good friends. The dogs knew where the treats were, obviously.
and the good
so,
people. Yeah.
Yeah. So we
So there
had
were
one
3
dog.
interns
who-
manning his table with,
Yeah.
with dog treats. What a combination.
Yeah.
Not
So we had a
bad-
couple dogs that didn't want to part, but they had walks to go on. So
Yeah, burn off the calories from.
Yeah,
Owners had to
exactly.
get CB and stuff.
Yeah. So we're going to this Wednesday. What is it? Dedham.
Yes.
Dedham Farmers
Dedham's-
Market.
Yeah, it's right there by the church on High
Mm-hmm.
Street.
Yeah.
And we're going to be there from like 1 to 5.
Yeah.
And we'll have a table. And so you can look for us with the logo of the duck and paddle and the logo with the springtail and worm of Natural Lawn campaign.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go there, stop by, we'll give you a sticker for Righe Whales.
Yeah.
Yes,
We have
several
yeah.
stickers.
Yeah, we have some really nice ones. I actually was going to mention that about the
Good, we
whale
got
thing.
30
We have
seconds
some
left.
we have some great stickers. We have a rectangular one, and then also a circular colored one. They're both really great and
Very
yeah,
cute.
very cute.
I
if
put
you
them
want,
on everything.
yeah, no, they're really great. So if you're looking for something to slap on your water bottle or your computer or what
Laptop.
have you, yeah, just stop by our table.
Yeah, or you can write to me, rob@oceanriver.org, and say, I want to get some stickers.
Yeah, and we'll get them to you.
So that's it for another hour. Thanks a lot for listening, everybody. And until next time, please take care of yourself and then take some care of this planet of ours.
Cool.
Awesome.
Nice. Well timed.